I'd like to welcome you all to our fourth week in our study of the book of Joshua. This week we will be continuing our textual study, beginning with chapter 4, verse 11, and continuing through chapter 5, verse 15. We continue our account of the Israelite conquest of the land of Canaan. And the point that we left off in our last discussion was the Jewish people had just successfully crossed the Jordan River on dry land. They had come across to the western side of the border, and they had carried with them the 12 stones from the riverbed of the Jordan River, which they were going to erect as a memorial. Immediately after their successful crossing, the 2.5 tribes, the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, the half tribe of Manasseh, confirm and fulfill to Joshua their promise, the same promise they had made to Moses, and they proceed to go ahead of the rest of the tribes of Israel, fully armed, to pass before the tribes as part of the vanguard for the conquest. Joshua now, as a result of this miraculous crossing, has been exalted in the eyes of all of his people. It is now clear from the miracles that God has done for Joshua at the Jordan River that he is the worthy successor of Moses who came before him. Now, the timing of this event is critically important. When did the Jewish people cross the Jordan River? When did they come to this time of the conquest of the land? Well, it turns out the book of Joshua tells us that this crossing is successfully completed on the 10th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, the month of spring. It is completed 5 days before the holiday of Passover. So actually, if you look back, the Jewish people began their journey on Passover 40 years earlier. We are now exactly 40 years later, about 5 days before Passover, the celebration of the Jewish people's exodus from Egypt. As they cross over the river, the Jewish people make camp at a place called Gilgal. I invite you to look at the maps in the backs of your books to locate Gilgal. It is located close to the point where the Jewish people have made their successful river crossing. It is located on the eastern boundary of the city of Jericho, and it is there in Gilgal that Joshua and the Israelites establish their base camp. This will be the place from which they will go out to continue to conquer the rest of the land of Canaan. So Gilgal will become a center for the next 14 years as part of the conquest of the land of Canaan, which becomes the land of Israel. When the Jewish people arrive in the campsite at Gilgal, the 12 stones that the individual members of the 12 tribes have carried over from the Jordan River, those 12 stones are erected into a memorial, and in subsequent history, whenever people come to Gilgal, they will be able to see this monument of stone, which bears testimony to the Jewish people's successful crossing of the Jordan River. At Gilgal, a very unusual ceremony takes place. We are informed that Joshua oversees a mass circumcision for all of the Israelite males who had not been circumcised during the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness of Sinai. We are told earlier that all of the Jews who had left Egypt before they left had been circumcised. The Jews had followed the rites of Brit Milah, and had themselves circumcised. But for some reason, which we will have to discover, during the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, the people do not circumcise their children during the course of their wanderings. And thus, when they come to Gilgal, Joshua instructs the people that all of the males among them who have not been circumcised will now be circumcised. This takes place. It is indeed the ceremony that gives Gilgal its particular name, as we will discuss this coming Tuesday. Following their circumcisions, the people remain in Gilgal for a period of days, and then at the conclusion of those few days, they observe the first Passover in the land of Canaan. On the 15th day of the month of Nisan, 5 days after the crossing, a couple of days after they have recuperated from this group circumcision ceremony, the Jewish people observed the first Passover in the land of Canaan. And we will talk about that too, and talk about its significance in our discussion session. Please take a look at those passages and notice, among other things, how they observe the Passover, what they do, and how this Passover in the land of Canaan is different from the first Passover that they observed on the night they left the land of Egypt. And then following that, we come to one last episode at the very end of chapter 5. It is a strange occurrence. Joshua has a confrontation with a mysterious sword-wielding stranger who Joshua confronts, not knowing what he is or what his purpose is. And it is this stranger who will give Joshua the final orders from God before he undertakes the conquest of the land of Canaan. Pay particular attention to this passage. Go through the commentaries that accompany the actual text. Hopefully it will help to clarify the significance of this very strange meeting. I have 5 questions that I would like you to consider in anticipation of our chat discussion. The questions will be sent to you along with a brief copy of the outline of what I am presenting today. And I urge you to, when you read this material again, to consider these questions in directing your reading. Question number 1. Why was it necessary for Joshua to conduct a mass circumcision ceremony for the Israelite males who entered the land of Canaan? And a subsidiary question of that, question 2, is why hadn't the Jewish people observed the rite of circumcision throughout their 40 years of wandering in the wilderness? Why was it necessary to circumcise all of these males? Why hadn't this been done throughout the course of the 40 years of wandering in the midst of the Sinai? That's question 2. Question 3, be prepared to describe how the Jewish people observed their first Passover in their promised land, and also be able to describe how this Passover differs from the first Passover of 40 years earlier when the Jewish people first left the land of Egypt. Question number 4. And this is a question that is not suggested by the text. It's a question I want to ask you and we will consider it, but it's a very provocative question. Over the course of the 40 years of their wandering, did the Jewish people observe Passover while they were in the desert? In other words, during those 40 years, each year from the first Passover, did the Jewish people continue to observe Passover each and every year of the 40 years of wandering? And if so, how was this observance of Passover obviously different than the Passover we celebrate today? Just to indicate one problem, part of the problem of Passover is avoiding chametz, is avoiding leavened food in the grains that we eat. But the Jewish people didn't eat grains during the 40 years of wandering. They were fed daily with manna. Manna is not a leavened product. If the Jewish people never ate leavened goods, how did they celebrate Passover for the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness? Consider that point. And finally, question number 5, in regard to the mysterious figure that confronts Joshua at the end of chapter 5. What was the message, as you read the account, what was the message conveyed to Joshua in this encounter? What was this mysterious stranger supposed to have conveyed to Joshua? What information did he give Joshua that was going to be critical in the events that we will discuss in the following week when we talk about the conquest of the city of Jericho? These are the questions for this week. I hope you have a wonderful Shabbat. I look forward to seeing you Tuesday night, 7 o'clock. Thank you.